Good morning. India will not have normal ties with China as long as the Modi government is in power. This was the clear message given by India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar at his recent interaction with Asia Society in New York. So, before I go any further, please listen in to the clip of what he said there at the Asia Society.
To make sure the border was peaceful, you had a series of agreements in 93, in 96, in 2005, 2006, 2012. So each one of these agreements went into greater and greater detail on how to ensure that the border remained peaceful and stable. Now, the problem was in 2020, despite these very explicit agreements, we saw that the Chinese, we were all in the middle of COVID at that time, if you remember, moved large number of forces in violation of these agreements to the line of actual control. And once troops, and we responded in kind, and once troops were deployed very close up, which is very dangerous, it was likely a mishap would happen, and it did happen. So there was a clash, and a number of troops died on either side. And that has since, in a sense, overshadowed the relationship. So until we are able to restore peace and tranquility on the border and ensure that the agreements which we have signed up to are adhered, it's obviously difficult to carry on with the rest of the relationship. So what has been the focus for the last 4 years is to, in the first instance, at least disengage the troops, which means that they go back to the camp, to the military bases from which they traditionally operate, because right now both sides have troops who are deployed forward. And when I said 75% of it has been sorted out, I was asked in a way to quantify it to give a sense. It's only of the disengagement. So that's one part of the problem. And the main issue right now is the patrolling. How do we, both of us, I would say, patrol up to the line of actual control. And right now, the patrolling arrangements after 2020 have been disturbed. So we've been able to sort out much of the disengagement, the friction points, but some of the patrolling issues need to be resolved. But once we deal with the disengagement, there is the larger issue, which is both of us have brought very large number of troops up to the border. So there is what we call the de-escalation issue. And then there is the next step is really how do you deal with the rest of the relationship, because right now the relationship is very significantly disturbed. That said, there are other issues that we need to look at. I mean, you have two countries who are neighbors, who are unique in the sense that they are the only two countries with over 1 billion people, and who are both rising in the global order, and who often have overlapping peripheries as well, other than the fact that they have a common border. So it's very so it's really a very complicated issue. I think in the global, if you look today in global politics, the parallel rises of India and China, I would say, present a very, very unique problem.
Now it is very clear towards the end of the clip when Jaishankar says that the parallel rise of India and China, each with a population of 1.4 billion, is a unique problem. That India today believes that it is in a regional geopolitical competition with China. If there was any doubt left in this, then outside the clip, Jaishankar also talks about, while interacting at the Asia Society, and says that a multipolar Asia is necessary for a multipolar world. He leaves no doubt about this competition. Now, this is an important subject because it concerns the development and prosperity of 1.4 billion people, and I will do this in a separate video which will be online tomorrow. In this video, I will just concentrate on the issue that Jaishankar has held for the last 4 years, peace and tranquility on the line of actual control for normal ties between India and China. Now please listen to the beginning of the clip, where Jaishankar says that despite old agreements, many agreements, and he is right, and he lists those agreements also, that in 2020, PLA moved large forces on the line of actual control. This statement of Jaishankar is incorrect and it is misleading, because the PLA did not move in large numbers in 2020. It moved in during the Doklam crisis of 2017. What had happened was that in 2015, the PLA did major structural reforms under which they created the Western Theatre Command exclusively against India. Now, when you create a structure like a command, you need hundreds and thousands of troops. The Chinese dilemma was that they had signed agreements with India under which both sides had agreed that not more than a limited number of forces, 5,000 troops to be precise on either side, and very limited heavy equipment will be brought in close to the line of actual control. If anything more was brought in, mutual consent would be required. So now the PLA was thinking how to get in forces, hundreds and thousands of troops, without violating the agreements, as then they would be seen as aggressors, and the stated policy of the PLA is that we only fight in self-defense. So they came up with a very clever ploy, and the Modi government fell for it because it is unable to see beyond its nose. I am not going in the details of the Doklam crisis, on which I have done videos earlier. The bottom line here is that it is the Indian Army which first inducted large forces, worrying about an escalation. That the crisis, if it escalates into a hot war, the troops, acclimatized troops, will be required. So the Chinese said that now we are also bringing in forces in self-defense. Once the crisis was diffused, the Indian Army came back. The Chinese never went back, rightly saying that Western Theatre Command is their territory and they are there. Why Jaishankar does not want to talk about this factual thing today is because it shows Modi government in a bad light, that they could not see beyond their nose. And they actually claimed a tactical victory, realizing only after a while that it was a ruse. It was a way that the PLA brought in forces by putting the blame of being the aggressor on the Indian side. So it happened in 2017. Now, what happened in 2020 was equally interesting, and once again, Jaishankar is being shot on truth. In 2020, the PLA, taking cover of the COVID, they did multiple deep incursions in eastern Ladakh, where the reports say that something like 2,000 square kilometers to 4,000 square kilometers they are occupying. The government is not willing to give the facts, it is not willing to talk on this issue. But it is very clear that the PLA has come very close to its 1959 claim line at most places in East Ladakh, the Western Theatre. Why did the PLA do that? Jaishankar repeatedly asks, and he says, I don't know why they did it. Well, he is the man who should know actually about this, because the Modi government removed 370-35A from Jammu and Kashmir on 5th of August 2019, and the next day, 6th of August 2019. The Union Home Minister Amit Shah said in Parliament that there will be two union territories, and as far as the Ladakh Union Territory is concerned, the new maps will be created where Akshay Chin will be shown as part of Ladakh. The Chinese immediately reacted because India has never had anything to do with Akshay Chin. India has never been in control of Akshay Chin. It belongs to them, and this is factually correct. Here was Amit Shah including it, and we actually made those new maps showing Akshay Chin as part of Ladakh. And why I say that it's factually incorrect is because here is a book by Ambassador T.N. Cole. It's called The Diplomat's Diary. He very clearly states he was a person who was present there in 1960 when Chinese Prime Minister Chou Enlai came to meet Prime Minister Nehru to resolve the border issue. At that time, he proposed, the Chinese side proposed, that you accept Karakoram range as the dividing line between India and China, whereas the Indian side said no, further east there is Kunlun range. And Prime Minister Nehru, who was in talks with the Chinese leader, he actually came out of the room. This is what T.N. Cole writes in the book. Nehru actually came out of the negotiating room and asked his senior officials why we insisted on the Kunlun range further east and not agree to the Karakoram range further west as the Chinese claimed. Both are in accordance with the highest watershed principle. His advisors said we had a cast iron case and Kunlun range was better from the defense angle, whatever that means. So, in reality, India never occupied that place, and it has always been under the occupation of the Chinese. Now, what has been under the occupation? The area between the Kunlun range and the Karakoram, and this is where Akshay Chin is. So, when the Modi government put it here on fully understanding the implication, Jaishankar on 11th of August 2019 went to Beijing to explain to the Chinese leadership that what we have done on the map has nothing to do with the ground. Our position on the ground as far as China is concerned, the line of actual control is concerned, or Pakistan, the line of control is concerned, it remains unchanged. Chinese did not agree to this. They said, we do not accept the cartographic aggression done by you. Now, the Chinese did not immediately do the incursion in East Ladakh. They looked for another opportunity. They rather insisted for the other opportunity, which was in the form of the second informal summit between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi in Chennai in October 2019, where Xi Jinping once again told the Indian leader that there is a need for peace between India and China and India and Pakistan for the development of both countries and the region. The Indian side ignored that. It was only after that taking the advantage of the COVID, that the Chinese, they moved in large forces and came close to the 1959 line at most places. So this is the factual condition. What this means is, to many people who say that why don't the Chinese go back? Well, the Chinese say, why don't you remove Akshay Chin from your maps? Consider this. Now, I also said that on the border issue, Jaishankar has moved the goalpost now. And how it has moved is that all this while he was talking of disengagement of troops. And when he was asked a little while before this talk at Asia Society, he replied that 75% of the issue, the border issue, has been sorted out with China, which at the Asia Society he clarified that, look, when I said this, and it is there in the clip, he says that it is only one part of the problem. There are patrolling issues that need to be resolved, and then he goes on to talk of de-escalation, which is something entirely different. Now, what has happened is that during the 31st round of working mechanism for consultation and coordination talks, which were held on the 29th August in Beijing, of which now there is a lot of mention in the press, Two concessions were given by the Chinese side to the Indian side to resolve this border issue, which are not mentioned in the media at all right now. The first concession was that the Chinese agreed. Earlier they were insisting on a package deal. What they were saying is that there is a problem, which is the old problem in Arunachal Pradesh at a place called Yangtze. That issue and the two issues that the Indian side wanted to be considered, which is at Tepsang and Demchok, the Chinese said they should be dealt as a package together. Because at Yangtze, the Chinese side, their grazing rights, they were getting affected. But the Indian side said, no, we will first want to tackle the immediate problem that has happened after 2020. Yangtze will be tackled later. So this was one sticking point, which had been going on for a long time. The Chinese agreed on the Indian position that all right, we will agree. We agree to first discuss Depchok and Depsang. And the second thing what they said was that at both places, at Depsang and Demchok, like we have done at the 4 other points, friction points, in East Ladakh, we can have a buffer zone where both sides can go 2 kilometers on their side. So there is a 4-kilometer buffer zone created. And then they also said that both sides can do patrolling in that area. All that the Indian side is required to do is inform the Chinese side that, and vice versa, that look, we are doing patrolling from this point to this point and this time to this time. Now this is the proposition they put on the table that takes care of the patrolling issue also, which by the way was never brought up by the Indian side at all, and not even in the discussions of the 29th August in Beijing. So they are quite willing to even adjust that also, and this is now for the Indian side to take the call, which means that if Indian side agrees to that, because after all Jaishankar has been saying the sticking point is disengagement. So the answer is there. But now Jaishankar has moved that goalpost by saying that the next thing required is de-escalation. Now I think he is a bit confused between de-escalation and de-induction, because if you hear his clip, he says that they should go out of the theatre, that is de-induction. Well, anyway, long and short is, if you see the 10th September 2020 agreement, joint statement, there is a joint statement of 10th September 2020 signed by two foreign ministers, Jaishankar and Wang He of China, in Moscow in the presence of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, that clearly says only disengagement, and then it gives the way forward, the modus vivendi. It does not mention at all de-escalation or de-induction, but this is something which has now been brought in as an additional point. So the issue is that as far as border is concerned, India does not want to resolve the border, because when the Indian side says, or the analysts say, why don't they go back to their pre-April 2020 positions, their point is that why don't you undo the maps that you have created, where Akshay Chin is shown part of Ladakh. You first do that, then we'll consider that. And I think it is a very reasonable proposition. Now, why does India not want normal relations with China? See, when I say normal relations, it could be a new normal. For example, there is a great possibility that the two sides may agree to a bit of tactical adjustments, because after all, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi will both be there at the BRICS summit in Kazan soon. And it will be very wrong if they don't even shake hands there. So some sort of adjustment is possible. For example, there is no direct flight between the two countries, that may start. But the long and short is, the normal relations will not be there at all. Now, in my video tomorrow, I will explain that big picture, what Jaishankar is talking about, the regional competition. Thank you.